So when and when not to transfer? That is the question. And today we're going to help provide you with some answers. Well, hello, it's Dr. Jason Parker with JP3 Training. And so many of my clients want to know when and when not to transfer. And so one of the biggest questions parents that I work with often have is transferring okay? And in relation to that question, what I like to tell them is environment is everything. When you think about a plant, when you think about anything that's evolving and needs to grow, it has to be in the right soil, it has to be in the right sun, it has to be in the right environment. And we as human beings, especially young human beings, are no different. And so as a parent, you are never wrong for testing the environment, checking to make sure that the environment is the right one for your young athlete to succeed. Now, this is somewhat a controversial topic because a lot of people think negatively anytime somebody wants to leave or is looking in any given situation, whether it be a job, whether it be a relationship, whatever the case may be. But we as human beings have to be in the right environment, and it's never wrong to at least check and make sure the environment is right for your young athlete. We're also starting to see this more and more. I don't care if you look at the college level, the pro level, and now increasingly at the high school level, states and governing bodies are making decisions that are allowing student athletes to seek solace in the form of finding a new school. We have the ability to change our cell phone plan, to change where we live, to change our internet provider at the drop of a hat. Why wouldn't that apply to one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make for your athlete? What I advise clients to think about is the fact that you only got 4. That's right, 4 years to get it right. Now, of those 4, they don't all have to be great, but you want to have at least 2 good years to give yourself a shot at just being your best, whether that means going to the college level or really just maximizing your talent as a serious athlete. And so know that environment is everything, and you're always right for checking the temperature of your environment. So now that we know that transferring is okay to consider, let's talk about some questions. Some questions that you as a parent, that you as a student athlete need to be considering in order to ensure that you're making the best decision. And what I like to do as a consultant is to look into 4 specific areas that we do a deep dive in order to assess whether or not another school or another situation may be better than the current situation. And area number 1 is location. Okay, believe it or not, so we all know that humans are more mobile than ever. We can get up and go across the state, across the country, even across the world in just a matter of hours sometimes. So when you think about the proposition of going to a school that may be 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half away, maybe even in a different state, maybe you're considering a prep school. Often we forget that location matters. You may even have a great situation that is far away that's going to cause you and your young athlete to commute, and you may have a ride set up. You may have a friend that's also in the same situation, and so there's a partnership or a collaboration there. You may think that all your boxes are checked and all your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed when it comes to commuting to a school. Believe me when I tell you, commuting causes conflict. There are so many hidden conflicts in commuting that we just often don't realize. First and foremost is just the stress of commuting. I mean, when you have less time in the day because of a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour commute, all of a sudden things get compressed. You forget that pair of shoes. You didn't pack the lunch. The night before, you're having to do so much to prepare. And that's not to mention the off-schedule times that will always pop up. There will be some type of team function or some type of school parent meeting that didn't get communicated. And all of a sudden, you have to get your young athlete to the school within a matter of time. And all of a sudden, all of the things that you set up to make sure it was smooth go out the window. And so your life becomes consumed with trying to schedule this commute. So don't fail to recognize that the commute can be consuming. The other thing is, as your young athlete completes practice or school each day, they're busy commuting back home, while the other young athletes in that district that live nearby to the school, they're all communing. They're doing things as a group. They may be going over each other's house to play PlayStation. They may be going to a birthday party together. They may be going out to eat. All of these things, all of these social constructs means your young athlete can potentially be looked at as an outsider rather than an insider. And so even though the coach may be perfect and the offense may be well suited and the depth chart is just right, but the energy within the team can be wrong. And so this is something that you definitely have to consider. Just know that commuting can become consuming. So the next question we want to consider when thinking about a school transfer is language. Are you or do you speak the same language as that school, as that district, as that community? And so what this basically relates to is the fact that culture is everything. I always like to say that culture creates critical connections. What is that school's and that team's culture like? Is it a fit with your young athlete? In this context, we want to look at things like, are the demographics matching up? Do the demographics make sense for your young athlete? You may even look at things like the ages of the athlete. Maybe your young athlete is a freshman and the team is full of seniors, and those seniors have a certain ownership and entitlement that they may not be welcoming of a young gun freshman coming in, and vice versa. Your child may be a senior and there's a group of good freshmen coming up, whatever the case may be. So we really want to look hard at the demographics of not only the school district, but the team. The other thing I find that's important is, what is that team and that school's sports culture like? Do they have a rich tradition and history and they're proud of their sports? Well, that could be both good and bad, because maybe there's a tradition of family members or community members being on that team in certain roles. All of a sudden, if that balance gets upended, maybe they're looking at your young athlete as to blame for that. Maybe it's a school district or a team that hasn't had a lot of success lately. And so maybe they're really welcoming, or maybe they really don't care about athletics. Maybe they don't put a lot of resources behind it. Maybe there's no accountability there. And so maybe that's not the best fit for your young athlete. Now, when it comes to transferring schools, the third component we always want to think about is the landscape. Now, this is the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of your decision. In the context of landscape, we want to look at things like the team's depth chart, style of play, and also level of play. So when it comes to depth chart, this involves an in-depth analysis of the athletes on the team and where you rank overall. Football teams are notorious for having what's called a too deep depth chart, where players are actually ranked by position. Basketball doesn't always write these things out explicitly, but you kind of know. And every coach will certainly know their depth chart. So this is a question you actually could ask: where do I fit on your team's depth chart? And what I tell my clients is that when it comes to depth chart, you want to look for 2 in 2. And what this means is that in at least one position group, you are in the top 2 for 2 consecutive years. And what that means is the year, the class that your young athlete is in, as well as the class above. What this guarantees is that if you're within the top 2 for 2 years, well, that means that by the time your young athlete reaches their junior year, they've got to be a starter or the primary backup player. And so that will give them a long runway and at least 2 years to go in and make an impact on a team. So let's say your child is a freshman and they play the center position. And so for freshmen and sophomores, they're probably the third best behind one sophomore who's really good, and then there is one other freshman that may be slotted a little bit higher. So you may say, well, for the next 4 years, the best we could ever do is be third string. Or you may say, well, I see my young athlete really growing as a player and developing some skills, and maybe he's not that far behind the number 2 player, and so he or she can definitely catch that person and will be in number 2 position by this time next year. The other thing about depth chart is know that other people can move in just like you're looking to move in. And so it's good to be towards the top of that depth chart whenever we are trying to make an impactful decision when it comes to choosing a school. Also within landscape context is the style of play. Does the style of play fit your young athlete? Maybe it's an up-tempo style where they're pushing the ball, everybody's getting a lot of shots, or maybe it's a slowed down style where we're gonna make sure everybody touches the ball every possession. Depending on the style of play that best suits your young athlete is where you're gonna wanna lean on that decision. But just know that style of play matters a lot. Style of play also takes a look at how many athletes are playing in a given contest. Some coaches like to play 6 or 7. Some coaches are willing to go 9, 10, maybe even 11 or 12 deep. So going back to the depth chart analysis, you're gonna wanna see if this dynamic really suits your young athlete. Now, know that things can change from year to year, but depth chart and style of play really usually remain consistent for most programs. Now, another question you want to answer when we're looking at the landscape is the level of play. So this can allude to how good or bad the team is, and both may offer pros and cons. A good team may be too good for your young athlete to really get significant playing time, or a bad team may be too bad to keep your student athlete engaged and in love with the game. So only you can answer those questions. But level also relates to the classification. Is it a big school? Is it a small school? Do they play a big time schedule where college coaches are going to be interested in or at least be aware of the teams they're playing against? Or maybe it's a small Episcopal or parochial league that isn't necessarily suited for young athletes looking to go to college, but really young athletes who are just wanting to make the most of their high school experience. Both are great, both have pros and cons, and it's just going to be a decision that is specifically related to your young athlete. Now, the last component to our rundown when considering transferring schools relates to 3 questions. Do you like the school? Do you love the school? Or are you lukewarm? Okay. This is a lot like getting into a relationship, right? A certain person may check all the boxes. Beautiful, kind, great heart, loves a lot of the things you love to do, but for some reason, you just don't have that vibe. You really need to check in with your young athlete to see whether or not they like the idea of this school, whether they love the idea of this school, or whether they are lukewarm about it. Whether they like or love it, you know you got potential magic there. You know that that's a potentially good place. Now, if they're lukewarm, that's not always a good thing because there's just no real energy, no real feeling, no real read on the situation. Now, with this being said, like, love, and being lukewarm can lead you in the wrong direction, especially for young kids. I know in my particular situation, and most kids don't want to transfer. Why? Because they want to be in the familiar. They want to be around their friends. They want to be where they've always been known and where they feel most comfortable. When I had the opportunity to transfer, I didn't want to, and my father said, this is what's best for you, based on the other factors that we looked at. Because those things were all in alignment, my father made the decision to transfer me between my 8th and 9th grade year, and it was the best thing ever. Just know that that's something that's important for your young athlete to consider and to be a part of that conversation, but also Don't just write it off if they say, I don't love it, or I don't like it, I don't want to do it. We have a design consultation guide that'll help walk you through each of the steps and most critical factors that are going to help you determine the best fit for your young athlete. If you're interested in learning more about our school consultation services, check out www.jp3training.com ancillary services.